welcome everybody. Thanks Claire, and thanks for everybody taking the time to attend. We're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity today. So let's start it off. All right. Quick review of the agenda. We're just going to talk about some of the best practices, what we see in the world, best practices out there, and then we'll kick it over to Mike for data protection conversation. So introduction to cloud security. So one of the things we really like to start with is that as you move into any cloud provider, there's a shared responsibility model. A very important piece to kind of wrap your head around and understand. And there's many reasons for that. It's not just because you're entered into a cloud provider and some things they take care of and some things you holistically need to take care of, but this concept and this methodology can actually be brought into your internal business. And as you see, let's say security shifting left towards more of a dev-centric process, your responsibility model can be mapped out there as well. So it helps really align your areas of responsibility, your least access privileges, and who actually is responsible for what. So a great matrix to really understand and replicate inside your org. Why focus on security? Mainly because the attack vectors are getting broader and our attacks are becoming more prevalent. So they just continue to increase, right? And as we're trying to stay compliant to not just our own internal business requirements and frameworks, but we also need to comply with others out there, right? Some regulatory processes. So want to make sure that we're keeping up with those. And prevent data breaches and data loss is one of the main concerns, but there's a lot of security benefits for that too, right? We centralize our security, we start to really get more of the business involved in that process. So it's not just a security team kind of in a silo, it's lending a hand from the devs and from operations and from all sides of the business to really think security first. And instead of thinking of it at the back end where it costs money to go back and redo, we're thinking of it in the forefront. So we're saving those costs and increases reliability. We put some processes in motion that really help us kind of iterate and cycle through that infinity wheel of services and really get the ROI out of what we're doing. So how does cloud security work? It's different for every vertical. It's different for every business. And so there's really no silver bullet, right? We have to kind of think of our own organization and what security means to us, where those pieces of the where are that are really important to us, and then really kind of zone in and focus on those pieces, right? So we just want to make sure that it's not just because, company ABC does security one way doesn't mean XYZ is going to do it the same way. So we have to be thoughtful about our own processes. And then part of iterating into the cloud is what we see out there is more of a centric around a workload, right? So if there is a front end, middleware, back end, and we're moving that to the cloud, we have to ask the same questions every time we do that, right? So we understand, how are we going to deliver this? What's our purpose putting that out there? How are we going to secure it? And how do we keep our protections on it, whether it's data or anything else? So each one has to have its own assessment and understanding what that is. So when we move it into the cloud, we're very thoughtful and purposeful about how we do that. And some of the hows are, obviously we're going to talk about these down the line, but identity management, threat intelligence, encryption, cloud vulnerability, micro-segmentation, the firewalls, your network firewalls, and then zero trust. These are all key components of what we need to think about as we're iterating out into a cloud environment. All right, so how we see it out there. The security landscape is made up of a few different high-level areas, right? So tech is one, right? That's what we're using, our code, our programming languages that we're using. The integrations between other third-party tools, right? So our homegrown applications hitting SAP or something else, right? We have to secure those integrations. Operations as a whole, right? How do we catwalk what we do really well and maybe what we don't do really well on-prem, and how do we catwalk that over to a cloud entity, and how does that change, right? How does that look in the world out there? And then our compliance piece. The beauty of cloud is that it's open, you can do anything with it. The problem with cloud is it's open, you can get in a lot of trouble, right? If we're not putting the right guardrails and the right parameters on what and how we do and how we manage our cloud environment, right? So part of it is a governance and a business governance section, and others is a development and SDLC process that we have to put in place. So we have to take those two pieces and really understand them. Right. The security ecosystem. This is high level, again, what we see as our main key pieces, right? So identity and access management, one of the biggest attack vectors out there, right? We have to really understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and we have to protect our identities. Those could be people, those could be service counts, it could be a lot of different things, right? So that we have to understand what that means and put the right protections in place, because we're human, we're perfectly flawed, right? We're gonna make mistakes, so we have to put the guardrails around that will help protect us from ourselves. Network security, again, perimeter controls, network controls, that zero trust is a huge piece of that. Again, takes the onus off the human being and puts it onto an automated or a process or a tool sometimes is the best thing. And that's a key point, right? So every solution is not tech, every solution is not a policy, and every solution is not a process, but those are the three components that will help us secure our lifecycle in a cloud identity, and we just have to find out which one that is and then apply those right controls. Data security, like I'll talk about a little bit later on, but encryption, huge, just encrypt, 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 right? We don't want to block ourselves out, but we want to make sure that we're protecting us from attacks. Workload protection, again, this is a huge piece because each workload is different, right? So we have to, again, take that into consideration as we move, whether we're on-prem or not. Like, we have to think about workload and what is the best protection for it and its pieces that are there. And then visibility in the operations. This is a huge component. You could do everything right, but if you're not watching your alerts or having automatic alerts and also having alerts with automatic actions taken, it's human error. We can't sift through all those logs, right? So we have to build in those systems that will help us be more efficient and proficient at what we do. So understanding our vulnerability management tools, our SIMs and SOARs, and then any machine learning. We have to really understand those, know what is junk and get rid of those logs, take the good logs, create alerts and actions on those alerts to help our team members be more efficient. All right. So what can help you when you get there? So there are many different ways we can attack this, right? It's either pre-cloud, and we can talk about what we do before we move anything into the cloud, or we can talk about that post-cloud, right? We're already there. We put a bunch of stuff in there. We don't know where we are. We don't know if we're secure. We don't know where our governance is. So there's assessments that can be done to make sure that where your gaps are and what we can do to kind of mitigate those gaps and help protect it. A lot of governance and security is somewhat of a set it and forget it in a cloud environment. To a certain extent, you do have to check in, obviously, every once in a while. But the beauty of that is that you can set up rules and policies and procedures and apply them, and then the system runs those, right? So they check on it and alert on that. So our job is really to look at those alerts as opposed to retweak those and tweak the policies and rules that we have to make sure they're efficient. But so that includes operations, our systems that are out there. Governance security is huge. DevOps, which again, we'll talk about this a little later, but it's a very important piece to help you iterate through. So we're taking the onus out of the people management, people managing things, and helping automate that as much as possible. So automation is huge. The more you can automate, the simpler your jobs become, and you can actually start learning new tasks and new tools and help build more proficiencies in the corporation. And then some of the services are out there that help a corporation that may not be able to, understand, have the right talent, or have the right time, right? We all wear many hats. So sometimes you need a little help. And so there's services from companies that'll do, like Insight, they'll do your security officer, they'll do the static code analysis, help you build the SIMs or manage the SIMs for you, help build those policy and procedures. How do we take our on-prem policy procedures and map those and add in the cloud proficiencies? That's something that can help. Cybersecurity audits, login monitoring, learning. We can set that sort of stuff up and help companies tweak the logs, and then compliance and cybersecurity training. Huge things to do to make sure that our people know what to do, and then they can have a better knowledge about how to protect themselves when they're iterating through. So a little breakdown of assessments. I won't go through the whole thing, but as far as governance, there's things we can do on the governance side. Security and compliance. We can run it against any framework that's out there that you would like. There's built-in tools that actually can sit there and run and give you that data all the time, or there's a static assessment. You do it one time, maybe a spreadsheet with all the pass, fail, or need to remediate, and we go from there. DevOps maturity, it's a huge thing. Again, as you're iterating through, you don't want to have a manual point and click all the time. You don't want to have to redo all the same tasks every single time you move something in. So automation is a very big piece. Your SDLC process, how do you iterate your code? How do you deliver your code? How do you keep it live and up to date without failures and bugs? That piece, and then shifting, left, the DevSecOps, really getting security and operations into the development lifecycle, and refactoring what that means, right? Some of the security functions might roll over to a dev function because it makes more sense and is more efficient there, right? But we have to put the guardrails on that and make sure that the developers understand what's going on. So it's that shared knowledge and responsibility across the corporation. Cloud readiness is another piece to make sure that you're walking into the cloud or you just started, really to understand and see where you're at. There's landing zones, there's governance, there's also these little pieces that if set up properly, it really does create this swim lane for developers to bounce off the walls, do whatever they want without running into trouble. So it's a huge piece to put in place. And one thing I actually forgot off here, because we're really talking about security, but this is also a huge piece when it comes to your finances, right? Getting in the cloud, you could sprawl with your resources to a point where it doesn't seem feasible to be in the cloud anymore. It's not cost prohibitive, but that's because we've gone too far and we're not shutting VMs off when we're not using them. We're not keeping tabs on what developers are deploying in the dev environment or even in other later environments down the road. So we really have to keep an eye on what's going on out there so we understand and keep our costs down too. And then infrastructure mapping, huge piece when you're walking into the cloud, because a lot of corporations, if we've had systems for a long time and third-party tools, we don't really know the dependencies, right? So we need to do a dependency mapping and really understand if we're moving, again, workload A, B, C, what part and parcel to that, and how does it all function, and where does it tie in elsewhere? And that also helps us understand to ask those questions of the 6 or 7 R's, whichever. There's difference out there, but do we rehost it? Do we replatform? Do we refactor, or do we retain it, or retire it? Like, these are huge questions to ask every time you assess a workload. So once you get a system going, it's very easy, but you need to make a system to understand what that means. And then security services, these are things that again, we talked about a little bit. There's audit assessments, there's logging and monitoring, and then development security, and then, solution securities like SIMs and SOARs. So need to have these in place because these are the gatekeepers. These are those things that keep everybody honest, right? We're watching, we're logging, we're alerting, and we're keeping tabs on that piece. And we need that correlative engine that does that piece because, again, humans can't do that, right? We just can't. We say we multitask, but you really can only do one thing at any point in time, right? So you can be working on 5 different things, but you can only do one thing at a time. So use the systems that are out there to help you be more proficient and efficient. All right, so what are some of those best practices out there from this? So DevSecOps, if you're doing DevOps, it's a very easy transition. If you're not doing DevOps at all, this can look daunting. But again, if you partner and help build a plan for this, it's an iterative plan, right? It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. We have to really be thoughtful about how we do it and get buy-in and adoption, and really not baby steps, but walk slowly at it to really build that process into your organization, because the employees will see the ROI over time. So this is a huge piece to get involved in if you're just starting or you're really, really mature and you're just kind of reviewing what's going on and seeing how you can build improvements in. But automate. It's just, it makes your life so much easier. And we talked about a little bit why it's important, but you really want to start with that security first mindset as you go through, whether, again, it's a development, a migration, a refactor, like all of this needs to have that security centric. So the more you can educate your developers and your operations and security on what's out there, what's the new attacks, what's prevalent in the industry, so that we can really focus on those and be laser focused on how we protect against those. Security testing, again, all this stuff, the more you move it towards the dev cycle, the less you find it in production and have to spend that huge amount of time, energy, and money to refactor that back into dev and re-go through that life cycle. So we want to catch it as we're in the development life cycle. Therefore, down the road, it's more of a rinse and repeat process. All right, challenges. I mean, high level, reluctant to integrate. I mean, this is huge. Change is tough, right? It is. This is the way I do it. It's the way it's always been done. Why do I need to change, right? These are hard things that we can help with in understanding and do that change management piece as you build in these processes in there. Battle of the tools. It's seen all over every vertical, right? Sec has their own, ops has theirs, and IT has theirs. How do we build that together into a unified platform so we see across the board, and then not always one pane of glass, but less panes of glasses, right? So we want to make sure that we can get as close to that single pane as possible, so we can drill down and really understand and follow that you call it like a little incident or whatever else. As we see it happen, we can really drill down and find out, oh, that came from the SQL server, it came from this user, and it came from that data set, right? So we have to have the tools in place to do that. And when you have sprawl, it's very tough to correlate that. And implementing security, again, it's change. It's organizational change management. So it can be tough for some teams. So I grew up loving change, but not everybody does. So it's something that we just have to find the right prescription for your organization and how it best resonates with your teams and your thought leaders. All right, and so there's some security tools, that we can instantly build into your build process that will help you with this visibility. So there's a few of them. I'm not going to read them right now, and I'll skip to the next and kind of show you how it looks. But it's just kind of a sample build pipeline, and as you're building your code, that static security scan, it just happens, right? It's just part of your build process, and it could be one of many different flavors of that. And then as you go through and package deploy, you can actually run that passive pen testing. And this is all automated. You're just getting results on it, whether a pass, fail, and then the description of where that leads. So very powerful piece. Again, it's not snap a finger set up, but once you get it in there, it's so powerful to have in your organization because it minimizes the churn and lessens that load on your teams. All right, so jumping into this, I wanted to start with this, but DevOps and DevSecOps is really important, but identity management is the most important piece in an organization right now. We are the biggest attack vector. We are, whether it comes from phishing attacks or just password sprawl or password reset or sharing passwords, losing devices, huge piece right here. So very, very paramount to have an identity management solution, whatever that looks like. Could be many different pieces all working together, could be one monolithic platform, but we have to be able to block bad passwords, known bad passwords. We need to be able to block regions IPs. We need to be able to really have those pieces in place that are out there. They're free in a sense. They're built into these platforms, so you can really regulate what your identities can and can't do. Like block a user who logged in from Pennsylvania at 12 o'clock and 12:02 from China, right? That person automatically gets blocked. These are that automated piece that we need to build into the organization to really help protect it. Threat intelligence, monitoring, and prevention. Again, hand in hand with identity management. This is where if we're not watching, we could have all the best systems in the world. If you're not watching your logs, then you're going to fail. Like we have to be able to see those alerts come in, and part of that process is dumbing down the noise and building in, just meaningful alerts. And if we can, build actions for those alerts, building dashboards for usability and, visibility. All these pieces are out there, and the more you implement them and the more you build them out in a mature fashion, the easier your life's going to be. All right, encryption. I could say it 100 times. We just want to encrypt as much as we can, whether it's encrypting your identities, encrypting the traffic between your front end, middleware, and back end, encrypting databases. We just got to look for those ways to encrypt. Again, I don't care what cloud vendor you're looking at. Every single one, the beauty of getting in the cloud again is that each resource has its own ability to either encrypt, put in a firewall in, IP restrictions, VNet integrations. So all these pieces help you really protect either that one resource or the workload you're having there, and you're building in these onion layers between each one. It becomes a more simple process, and so the thought process is to do that as much as possible without deterring your teams from their work. Vulnerability and pen testing. So we touched on it a little bit, so I won't run through this too much, but very important piece to do, and shift it left as much as possible. Get it out of people's hands, even in QA process, as much as you can automate those. The QA process really helps with the churn on employees. So doing the same thing over and over again, I don't know if there's anyone who really does like it. They'll tell you they do, but I'm not sure it's true. So let them iterate, let them build better skills by automating as much as you can. So pen testing, vulnerability testing can be done as far left as you can, and it minimizes the churn of your teams. Time check, okay. Micro-segmentation is another big piece. Simplify your stack, because trying to update code on a monolithic application and then deploying that, there's just inherent errors in that. There could be developers who added something that shouldn't have been added. So the more you break it apart and micro-segment, whatever it is, the easier time you're going to have to do your build, release, and your security pieces, because you're only touching one little piece of your pie, not the whole thing. So huge thing to do is break it apart and modularize as much as possible. Next generation firewall, again, this is a big piece, whether it's your cloud environment is kind of static and it's just out there, you're connecting to on-prem, you're partnering with other businesses. We've got to have that visibility, that IDS and IPS, web filtering, all that kind of stuff's got to be in there. And again, there's actions within a really good firewall that you can take and set up so that if A happens, action is B. And it just minimizes the churn of log retention and log viewing and log reviews. And zero trust. Never trust, always verify. This is becoming a big piece. Most corporations have a great cybersecurity program and training, and that is wonderful. But we still have to put those guardrails on. So building a zero trust platform inside of your cloud environment is key and paramount, because again, we're humans, right? If we're not forced to do something, we will cheat as much as possible. So we got to protect our identities and our people as much as possible. Right. So reduce the reduction in, you just want to make sure you're enhancing the business agility or cost reduction as well. And this is really the modern approach. You just want to make sure that you're taking as much onus out of the individual as possible and letting them, and just giving them what they need to do, right? Give them the pieces they need to do, give them the permissions they need, and only that. And that saves you time and money and saves them time and money. All right, that's it for me. Any questions before I pass this off to Mike to talk about data? Awesome. All right, it's all yours, Mike.
All right, thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. Just wanted to kind of, I've got a couple slides here. We'll just really cover just kind of Microsoft 365 data protection and just, kind of some of maybe the best practices or things to think about from cloud native workloads. This is just a small slide. I'm assuming most everybody knows what Microsoft 365 is, but most everybody uses it for mail, or obviously we're using Teams right now, but there's other certainly components to it, SharePoint, OneDrive, et cetera. Go ahead, Brian. So as Brian alluded to, earlier with the whole shared responsibility model, when it comes to data, security, data protection is no different depending upon the workload. One of the things I run into users or have discussions with quite a bit about 365 is I've already got retention policies on there. Why do I need to have a backup of it? And in my my experience, retention policies aren't backups. It's like taking storage level snapshots. If something got corrupted on that storage array, you've lost all your data, even though if you've had those snapshots on there. And I treat 365 the same way. So the other thing is with employee churn, if you've got a high level of turnover in your organization and you're leveraging M365, you have to pay for all those user licenses if you're keeping that data. So having a separate backup platform and being able to take that data off certainly can reduce those operating costs, at least from a M365. And then legal hold and e-discovery, take a look at that. There's capabilities of being able to kind of do content level searching and legal hold on certain mail or sites, OneDrive files. Certainly data loss, whether it's accidental or a malicious actor, is certainly one of the main reasons for doing any data protection. And as well as just being able to capture those point in time versions, changes in the files, and then if you've got any compliance or regulation requirements. Right, Brian? So just about what we've seen in the landscape from 365, there are a lot of vendors that are out there. Some only just do 365 and maybe not support other workloads, but really it's there to provide your full point-in-time copies, and, from accidental deletion and other things. Some vendors only support a couple components, whether it's mail or OneDrive. So if you need to have support for SharePoint or other components, just make sure, as far as that the vendor does support that. But also take a look at your existing backup solution. Microsoft 365, they may already integrate with that. Other things to think about is your data storage options. Right now, obviously, the 365 data is in the cloud. Do you want to keep it up there, or do you want to bring it down into your own data center for access and control? Do you want to leverage more of a black box, easy to use type solution, where it's managed by the vendor, or kind of a hybrid where you bring your own cloud storage and store it there? You have control over it, but obviously there's a little additional cost there. What we're seeing from the backup vendors on licensing, really everybody's moved to the subscription model, and it comes down to really just the number of users in your environment. What's the average size of the user, mailbox and total data, and then how long do you want to keep it? Sometimes it's a year, 7 years. So really that's what we're kind of, just seeing in the landscape there. And then for just those storage options, it's just a little pros and cons on it. Certainly bringing it down on premises, you've got control over it, but then you do have to manage that storage. And then if you needed to do a mass recovery, what is your network pipe and bottleneck back to Microsoft 365 from there? Vendor hosted, it really is easy. Black box, possibly integrates with your the current backup solution that you're using. The only con really is you just have no control of that data if they get bought or go out of business. And then you bring your own cloud as that hybrid approach. Really, you get into your leverages existing resources, but you may have to require additional compute and storage, certainly to kind of manage all that. Things to consider, really, as we talked about, kind of there's a lot of vendors that are out there. It really comes down to kind of company viability. Are they going to be around in 3 to 5 years? And then locality, where do you want to have that data reside? And then support for those options. So one of the things we find is, you want to back up mail, but it may not include calendaring or reminding notes and things like that. So just make sure when you're kind of investigating that they cover all that. Or all your requirements. And then long-term data needs, how long do you need to keep it? And if you need to keep it 7 years or longer, does your cost increase around that? And then do you want to manage the solution or possibly have Insight do that for you? We've got a great managed services organization that can help out with that. And then really it comes down to governance. Do you need to be able to do content-based searches on backups? Mark objects for legal hold, and then the big thing out there really is data immutability. With ransomware prevalent, do you have the object lock storage or archive, or certainly let a vendor manage that as well. And then the ease of restores, is it back to the same mailbox, to a compliance officer's mailbox, or just export out to a PST? So some of the features that are there. And then I did want to get thanks, Brian. And then really talking about cloud data protection and the evolution. One of the things when the cloud, kind of first sprung up is, all right, it's great, we can spin up all these workloads. And I kind of look at it back when VMware first came out in the environment, where you could spin up VMs left and right in your data center, but there was really no easy way to back that up. There wasn't, you almost had to treat it as a physical machine, like you were, in the environment, installing an agent and backing that up. What we've seen over this past couple of years is the cloud vendors are developing APIs, or really software hooks, that backup vendors can use to be able to automate and orchestrate some of these data protection capabilities. Normally IaaS workloads were targeted, but now we're seeing more support for PaaS and SaaS workloads. And then what we also seen is that cloud vendors themselves, due to kind of an outpouring, hey, I need to be able to back this up and manage this, have developed their own tools to be able to kind of manage it and integrate it. But they're really, in the end, they lack a lot of features that you would see in an enterprise backup product. So one of the things that we're seeing now backup vendors provide support for is being able to kind of have that single pane of glass for managing both your on-premises as well as cloud workloads. And then they're really targeting the vendors based on customer feedback and overall market share and partnerships. I'll give a shout out here to Rubrik and Microsoft for our sponsors here. They do have a great partnership and work very well together if that's your cloud platform. And as cloud vendors, they're working to add their update their APIs and workloads to be able to kind of prioritize the development and add support for those features as the cloud vendor adds them. And then, things to consider. Yes, you've got your cloud native tools. You can use them, but really, I think just an overall, what we're seeing more is that people are leveraging their enterprise backup software to kind of have that single pane of glass and manage it. Just really depends on how the organization and what the responsibilities are. Again, data locality. Where do you want to store it? One of the things we're seeing is due to ransomware and possible malicious users is you create a separate tenant and actually store all your data in a separate tenant, separate keys, passwords, etc., so that if you do have your primary data center or data stores compromised, that your backups are still at least in place and are not accessible. And then data redundancy, a lot of times is that, okay, do I want to just store lower costs in a single region, or do we spread that data out over multiple regions? And then for backup storage, a lot of it comes down to tiering, especially at the object level. Do I want to go with a hot or cool target versus maybe an archive or S3 Glacier? Everybody loves the price of archive or Glacier, but then that recovery time gets into, it can take anywhere from 4 to 12 hours depending upon where it's at, and how much data you're bringing back can really delay being able to recover your objects. And then, some of the biggest things now is the ability to do kind of cloud, object or archive lock, being able to just lock down that data so nobody, not even, the total admin user, can go ahead and delete it. And then also vendor hosted managed storage. I know Rubrik's got a great offering as well, where their Vault offering where you can store and manage the data there. And then just backup vendor support overall, certainly making sure that there's role-based access control, that they work with your given chosen cloud vendor. The other thing we're also seeing is more of a software just as a service type model versus having to build your own cloud or compute workload based on the marketplace. As a service just seems to it's a lot easier and just less cost overall from that perspective. And then the DR orchestration automation, make sure that meets your business continuity requirements. And then just from a software, what we're seeing now is a lot of these enterprise backup vendors are doing the anomaly and malware backup scanning and detection and alerting. And that's really kind of a big focus, certainly just security overall.